watching Startup Central, and let's now put the spotlight on India's semiconductor market that is projected to grow to $103.4 billion by 2030, which is in the next 5 years, and that will power the $400+ billion worth of electronics market, and that's as per a report by Indian Electronics and Semiconductor Association. Currently, India's semiconductor consumption market is valued at $52, which is for the year 2024 and 25, and that is expected to grow at a robust CAGR of 13% through 2030. But the big question is, what will it really take to fast-track the development of the sector, and how can India make a place for itself in the global semiconductor market? To discuss that and more, I'm now joined by Ashok Chandak, who's the president of IESA. Thank you very much, Mr. Chandak, for joining us here on ET Now.
Hi, good evening. Thanks very much for inviting.
Mr. Chandak, we're speaking at right. Mr. Chandak, we're speaking at a time when the Prime Minister is embarking on a visit to France, to the United States, and of course tech remains an important area of partnership between the United States and India. Now, India is looking at a window of 20 years to give a boost to the semiconductor ecosystem, given the time it takes. Give us a realistic assessment of where currently India stands when it comes to boosting the chip ecosystem. We currently have at least 5 projects that are currently underway. The Union Minister has stated that the first chip should roll out by this year. Give us your realistic assessment of where we stand with respect to where things are globally.
Great, thank you. So, a semiconductor ecosystem is very complex, and it's not only starting from the sand or let's say materials, minerals, gases, chemicals, wafers, foundry, assembly, and final utilization into the electronic product. And India has been very much ahead in terms of the chip design activities, mainly because of the captive design centers of several global players, including mostly the United States-based companies actually, as we speak, plus also Japanese, European, other people. But India has been lagging bit onto the manufacturing side, and that is what getting into the boost now. And we have been always embarking on a strategy, which is the design-led manufacturing. And the time has come now with the 5 projects, what you just mentioned, and many viewers are aware, those were approved. But, we have been tracking. In addition to that, there are several projects, those were in a pipeline, several applications, those have been made to MeitY for the funding approval, and also to several state governments. So as far as I see today, we see total 16 projects, those are committed either by Ministry of Electronics IT at a central level or by various state governments. So there are projects approved in Tamil Nadu, in Chhattisgarh, in Maharashtra, in UP, also additional projects in Gujarat. So things are really beginning to shape up very well. Total commitments we see right now is about close to $25 billion in terms of the manufacturing activity, predominantly into the assembly and test operations, onto the foundry, which is we call as the chip wafer manufacturing. There is one main plant of Tata, which is approved for state of Gujarat. So things are really beginning to shape very well, and this is just the beginning. Typically, as you also mentioned, this sector is more of a long haul. It takes decades and decades before you established a critical mass and supremacy. But I would call in a short period of time, what India has achieved is really good breakthrough. Because considering other countries, how much time they took and how they really
Absolutely, Mr. Chandak, and it will be interesting to see. Yes. So we'll have to see how this pans out and develops, given the kind of ecosystem that the government is trying to build in Gujarat and now in Assam as well, where Tata is also coming up with its facility for semiconductors. But when we talk about the India Semiconductor Mission, now of course the government is looking at phase 2 of that. There are some pending applications that are getting approved from Semiconductor Mission Part 1. But what are your big expectations from the government? And what is it that the government should look at with respect to giving a boost to the semiconductor ecosystem? Should we be focusing more on the design aspect of it? Should we go to more advanced nodes or stay with basic nodes? How exactly are your expectations shaped up, and what is your message then to policymakers?
So our view is we already have a very robust and good design ecosystem that need to be still nurtured and utilized in a different way. Too far, most of our design competency is more of a captive design centers, and we need to move a value chain to become a product creation nation. That means that semiconductor design ability and a competency has to be translated into creating a complete semiconductor product. But that's a clear value addition when we move that into utilization for electronics manufacturing. So that's a point number one. Getting towards the product creation and R&D, so that design link incentive DLI scheme, which was already approved and it is undergoing some further modifications and updates, would be very useful actually to step this agenda forward. Number two, we still need to get into more international cooperations because India did not have the robust manufacturing ecosystem. That means we are dependent on a technology transfer or a technology sharing by some established global player. So this need to further step up, including with the United States companies, because more than 60% of the global semiconductor market is still controlled, so-called, by United States-based companies actually. So that's important. And number three, on manufacturing, you mentioned on the ISM, India Semiconductor Mission 1.0. Now we are looking at 2.0. So expectation is some additional financial outlay and the funding support has to be approved. I understand this is already at the cabinet stage. It was not announced into the budget actually, but it is in process. What we understand during the meetings with the ministry is this is definitely on cards. I'm not sure at this moment when this would get concluded, but we expect very soon this would get concluded and additional new funding beyond that $10 billion, which was initially provided for, would get implemented. And that would be another shot in arm. But that would be a clear demonstration of a government of India's commitment. And it would attract further the global players in addition to the Indian players, those are showing the interest over here. And the last but not the least,
Right.
the focus on workforce development is also equally important. And this is also one of the topics which everybody is struggling, including this is also one of the bilateral topic between India and US. So these workforce development related activities are also progressing. During this budget, some announcements were made with regards to the additional support on the R&D and the skilling topic. So that would add up. So these are the few measures which we need to take. I can see that the government is very committed and so is the industry. And I always believe that it is, we should not always ask me government only that you do this, you do that, you provide this. Industry also has their role to play and industry is coming to that. And we can see that the several Indian corporates particularly have really come forward, be it Tata, be it Keynes, CG Power, RRP, Suchi Telecom, and we can count more of them, including HCL Group. Several companies are coming forward now. They see this is an important sector for the country, not only from a strategic perspective, but also long-term businessmen. So things are moving forward. And you did mention about the first chip.
Let me interject you here. Yes, Mr. Chandak, things are moving. Yes, Mr. Chandak, things are moving forward. But when you talk about the India Semiconductor Mission, you of course mentioned that how companies are coming forth, how government is also enabling an ecosystem for development of semiconductors in the country. But what is it, the kind of financial support that the industry is looking at? Could you give us an indication of the kind of figures that you're looking at proposing to the government?
During our recommendation, we did mention our expectation is the policy need to continue at least 10 years more actually, considering the semiconductor manufacturing is a long haul. And as just to give an example, when the Tata project was announced for the wafer fab, it gets on stream by 2027. So it takes multiple years before things get completed. The Micron project, for example, which is an assembly test operation that goes on stream pretty fast, it also took more than 12 to 18 months actually, it takes typically. So these schemes have to be continued for a long time. Our expectation is at least for 10 years, we need the scheme support. The amount could vary maybe around $15 to $20 billion additional outlay, considering the previous 10 billion was already committed. That would help us to get into a decent start. And then after that, the industry need to find its own equilibrium and find its self-sustenance more.
Absolutely, and find clients and of course, find businesses as well to cater to. And thank you very much, Mr. Chandak, for your input. So clearly the industry is asking for $10 to $20 billion in ISM Part 2. And of course, this should be, these subsidies should be extended for a period of at least 10 years is what the word coming in from IESA. Ladies and gentlemen, on that note, it's time for us to wrap up this edition of Startup Central. Hope you liked the show as much as we did putting it together for you. From me and the entire team, goodbye and thank you very much for staying with us.
ये है स्कैमर साहब, ये कह रहे हैं एटीएम कार्ड की डिटेल दो